Welcome back. And if you were in the last session with Chris and the ones previous to that, you are riding on a journey with us with respect to connecting research with purpose and value and action. And so this session will happen in two parts. One part, we're going to introduce a framework to you, which is supportive of every conversation that's happened so far today, and you will see why when Janelle gets into it. And then the second part is going to be a facilitated dialogue where we will have the chance to do further discovery, but also hopefully our intention is to really provide an integrative experience for all of the discussions that have happened this morning so far, or this afternoon, or over the last few hours in your world. So I'm going to turn it over to Janelle King.
Can you see my screen?
Perfect.
Woo! Tech works. Hi, thank you all for coming to this session. I'm Janelle King. I am a Fetzer Scholar, and I'm here with Paul Schmidt, whom we all know and love, and Stacy Gunther, who we also all know and love. She's also a Fetzer Scholar. And I want to be clear just right from the start that what we are up to is we are not presenting our own research in this session. Rather, what we are doing is sharing an emerging framework that is being developed globally that could have tremendous relevance for what we do within the MSR and with our own research. So that said, let me make sure I can move forward. As Paul noted, we're going to do this in two parts. The times are ish. So we're going to spend about 30 minutes diving into what this interdevelopment goals framework is, where it came from, unpacking it, and then there will be an opportunity for some reflexive journaling, and then we'll have the facilitated dialogue. So to keep me on track, let's dive straight into part one, which is introducing these interdevelopment goals and the framework. So the framework is comprised of skills and qualities that individuals and organizations need to develop in order to successfully work with complex societal issues. And in particular, going to do a little backstory for you real quick. This is coming from when the United Nations established its global goals for sustainable development. And we heard Jody Fry mention this in his session. The purpose that the UN was striving towards was to put together a comprehensive plan because stuff is going crazy in the world. And they identified 17 different areas that we need to make significant positive improvements in for us to maintain or to create and maintain a sustainable planet and a sustainable humanity. So the thing I want to emphasize here is while those goals were established in 2015 as part of Agenda 2030, progress so far has been a bit lacking. And Jody mentioned that. One of the groups that has been paying attention to these goals was one who got together in 2019. I'm doing this really quickly. They got together, this group of thought leaders in adult development. They got together in an archipelago, can never say that word, in Stockholm. And they had a conference where they put together a sort of manifesto, if you will, where they identified the need to rebalance humankind's material and technological power with the relative underdevelopment of the inner skills and qualities we need to manage this power and the increasing complexity that's happening in the world. So they created a document including organizations in the corporate sector, academic partners, and practitioners. And their goal is to really educate, inspire, and empower people to be a positive force for change in society in their own lives and those around them, and at the same time, help folks find purpose and meaning in their lives. So let me touch briefly on the process and method that the IDG used to develop these goals. They're going through a 3-phase process. And I say they're going through because it's ongoing. It really started in the fall of 2020 for phase 1, where the group got together and they were going to create the first draft of a framework that partners could use worldwide to help develop the goals that can help fill the gap between what we want to see accomplished in terms of the UN sustainability goals and what people are actually doing in the world for showing up to make those changes. So they conducted surveys with over 1,000 people to identify what sort of qualities, skills, and traits these folks saw as important. And so just to look really quick, so what abilities, qualities, or skills do you believe are essential to develop individually and collectively in order to get us significantly closer to fulfilling the UN Sustainable Developmental Goals? And then they were asked to add to the list that was provided. Please write 3 to 7 if you want, which ones you think are important and why you think these are essential. So the initiative took all of that survey data and they coupled it with additional data coming from 3 conferences that they held across the world. And they compiled a list of 22 qualities that were emerging from their research. And so if I go back up here, they took that and they started into phase 2 in May of 21, where they started drafting an initial field kit. And that's when they validated the data through the second survey that they conducted. They had over 2,000 contributors, tons of academic advisory board representation. And when they validated this data, they found that really there were 23 qualities that emerged, and that these qualities could be condensed down into 5 categories. So they took that information, they prototyped the summit where they could vet the information, they could get it out into more people's hands. And they also have been co-creating over 100 interdevelopment goal hubs across the country or across the world to bring in that co-creative and collaborative energy. One of the things about the surveys that they conducted in the resulting framework is that the IDG is very aware that there is potential for bias because many of the respondents to the survey came from Western-oriented countries and also came from populations who were already favorably oriented towards leadership studies and global sustainability. And so one of the things about phase 2, by establishing these hubs and reaching out to more and more people, is they want to mitigate that bias by having global participation in co-creating this framework. And they're getting toward the end of phase 2, and then they will be moving into phase 3 for global outreach in September of 22, moving into September of 24, where they've got the kit, they've got the hubs in place, they're distributing it digitally, they're running more research and practice, they're running pilot programs with specific countries, and they are launching an international alliance to help prioritize and disseminate the framework and achieve the goals that it is striving to accomplish. So that's a really quick backstory. The meat, the good stuff, is the current framework. It's a current framework because the surveys are still out there. Feel free to go to the IDG website, which we have a link later in the presentation for. Contribute, reach out, get involved. They are going to change as the project develops and new information and output comes in. So the 5, there are 5 categories. As I go through this information, I'm going to do a really high level, and then I'm going to dig into each category a little deeper and bring some flavor to it. As you listen to this, I invite you to think from the perspective of, I am a researcher. We are researchers. We are part of this MSR community. We have a vision that speaks to human flourishing, global consciousness, bettering the world, right? So as you hear these, think about your own research, think about how how these qualities could be reflected in or are missing in the research that we're doing for the world. The 5 categories are being, meaning being in relationship with self. I think of that as our heart. Then there is thinking, the cognitive skills that come into play. I think of that as our mind. Relating, caring for others in the world. And then there's collaborating, which are the social skills necessary to drive the 5th one, acting, driving that change. And because a professor of mine, Dr. Marina Smirnova, does a wonderful thing of kinetic association with memory, if you would all be willing just to kind of anchor this in yourselves, those 5 stages or those 5 categories: being, hands on the heart; thinking, hands on the forehead; relating, hands outstretched; collaborating, hands together; and acting, getting it done, driving that change. So being, thinking, relating, collaborating, acting. Now let's dive a little deeper. So the first one is being, or relationship to self. And I'm going to go quickly over this one because I think this speaks to much of the heart of what MSR is about, right? We are cultivating our inner life, developing and deepening our relationship to our thoughts, feelings, and body to help us be present, intentional, and non-reactive when we face complexity. So a couple of things that I'd love to highlight on that. They have 5 different skills or qualities listed here: inner compass, integrity and authenticity, openness and learning mindset, self-awareness, and presence. So when it comes to inner compass, it's not so much a skill set, so much as a consequence of the broad scope of awareness that leads us to care for and contribute to the welfare of something bigger than ourselves, right? When it comes to integrity and authenticity, now we're speaking about values that we've identified with and are committed to practicing, but it's also really strongly related to our personal maturity. When it comes to openness and learning mindset, it's that capacity to be open to learning, to reevaluate, being curious about alternative ways of perceiving and interpreting the issues that are out there. And this one really requires a robust and complex identity, right? We have to have a sense of identity that is not going to feel threatened by any cognitive dissonance that comes up when we hold that open mind and we take in diverse perspectives. When it comes to self-awareness, that's what's going on inside of a person. It's got a tremendous impact on that person's potential for being effective when engaging with complex issues, especially in interaction with people with diverse perspectives and interests. Lastly, when it comes to presence, this one is emphasizing the quality of making oneself fully available in encounters with other people and accepting, mindful, sensitive, and non-judgmental ways. Now let's jump on over to the second one. Thinking, the cognitive skills involved, right? We're developing these skills by taking different perspectives, pluriperspectivism, evaluating information, making sense of the world as an interconnected whole. And those pieces are essential for wise decision-making. Again, seeing a lot of ties with what we do within MSR, right? Critical thinking. It's about being able to have that reflective judgment or skills of argument within our research. And the main way that we do this is through the probing questions that we ask, or the statements, validity, claims, views, and opinions that we are presenting through what we research. When it comes to complexity awareness, it is first and foremost a keen awareness that certain issues are going to be complex, and perhaps they're going to be complex in ways that we aren't even aware of yet. So this piece pulls into play systems thinking, right? That propensity to look for patterns of wholes, how elements of systems interact in complex ways, and how that leads to system dynamics and emergent properties of systems. With this complexity awareness, we also have perspective skills, right? Being aware that our view of the world and the issues and events is a view, and it's our view, right? It's our interpretation based on a limited and selective set of data, and it's complemented by our assumptions and judgments, which are not necessarily backed up by proven facts. So being able to hold that open-mindedness, that openness learning mindset and perspective skills, they really go hand in hand here. Let's move to sense making. That's partly about the values that we've identified with and we're committed to practicing. And it's also strongly related to personal maturity. The more mature we become, the deeper our values are held, and the easier in quotes it is for engaging in sense making. We have long-term orientation and visioning here. That's the capacity to be open and learning, or open to learning and reevaluation, and being curious, right, about alternative ways of perceiving, knowing, interpreting various issues. And that's going to call for a robust sense of self. This type of work could be threatening to the self if it is really attached to identity. And so being able to orient to long-term visioning requires us to be open in our understanding of our sense of self. So that's that one. And again, this is not our research. We are presenting a taste of what this framework is for consideration on how it can inform our research moving forward. So the third piece is what we're doing here during this colloquium, right? We're relating, we're caring for others and the world. And that's drawing on skill sets of appreciation, connectedness, humility, empathy, and compassion. And so when it comes to appreciation, it's not technically a skill in this framework so much as a mode of relating to people and the social, material, and natural worlds, and can be strengthened through our own effort, right? This is going to draw upon a basic appreciative attitude that we bring to build connection and trust between people. And therefore, it's also conducive to creating collaboration and collaborative environments. When it comes to connectedness, this is incredibly strongly related with felt identity, right? That sense of connectedness, more or less, is going to automatically lead us to a sense of caring for the well-being of the larger whole, because we're a part of it. We feel that connection. When it comes to humility, we're talking about the capacity to act without concern for looking good in the eyes of others. And the stance is really a result of, or a consequence of, not being overly identifying with a certain self-image and a need to be confirmed in that self-image by others. If we think we have to be a certain way and we have to be perceived in a certain way, that's going to shut down our ability to connect, which shuts down our ability to collaborate. And all of these things, I think you can see as I'm going through them, are interconnected. They support each other, they fuel each other. When it comes to empathy and compassion, I probably don't need to emphasize this for this room, but the IBG does make the distinction that when they talk about empathy, it's the capacity to understand and feel into what other people are feeling with reasonable accuracy. Whereas when we talk about compassion, it's that, but it adds the quality of wanting to relate to other people with benevolence, right? And these are important factors for emotional intelligence, connectedness, again, appreciation. Moving to the fourth of 5 categories, collaborating, those social skills. We're making progress on shared concerns. We need to develop our abilities to include, hold space, and communicate with stakeholders with different values, skills, and competencies. And while we are doing that here at the MSR Colloquium, while we do that at our retreats and our other gatherings, I think there's an invitation here for us to consider how we can be doing this through the research that we contribute and how our research can facilitate collaboration moving forward. And so the skills that the inner development goals, brain just shut down for a second, initiative just have put forth, they are communication skills, co-creation skills, inclusive mindset and intercultural competence, trust, mobilization skills, and communication skills. We know what those are, so I'll hit that very lightly. Co-creation, those skills are focused on not just facilitating, but cultivating the motivation to develop collaborative relationships with different stakeholders, right? And so we're creating an open environment. We have trust and psychological safety. We're leading meetings in ways that structure the work through a shared focus. We're encouraging creativity and openness to diverse input. We're deconstructing power dynamics that might hinder open and creative collaboration. When it comes to inclusive mindset and intercultural competence, that's being actively interested in seeking out, considering, and involving individuals and groups with diverse backgrounds, identities, and views. But that's just one facet. More specifically, this piece speaks to working in international contexts, right? Working in international contexts means that differences in culturally conditioned norms, values, attitudes, expectations, behavioral patterns, etc., these play a significant role in successful collaboration. And so building the skills to support international collaboration become extremely important within this context. When it comes to trust, it's interesting. It's included as a skill or a quality in this framework, when normally trust is often understood as an outcome, right? We do the things that generates trust. And so the invitation here is to have trust as a basic attitude and something that you are actively practicing, cultivating as a skill. The last one, mobilization skills, I think is really interesting for us as researchers, right? Because we'll put together our findings, we'll put them out into the world. There was a really interesting discussion happening in Chris Lauslow's session in the chat about how do we put our research out into the world for impact. Mobilization is a lot like co-creation skills, but mobilization is including reaching out broadly to different groups of people, evoking their interest and offering productive ways for them to become actively involved in various kinds of work, right? And so we're talking about things such as courage and optimism that allow us to really cultivate true agency. That agency allows us to break old patterns, generate original ideas, act with persistence in uncertain times. Number 5, almost there. I wish we had more time because these are all so juicy. The last piece, and again, one to consider through our research, acting or driving change. These qualities such as courage and optimism help us acquire true agency And that allows us to break those old patterns, generate original ideas, and act with persistence in uncertain times. Now, the IDG has identified 4 qualities: courage, creativity, optimism, and perseverance that drive the ability to act or drive change. And so courage, it's not easily regarded as a skill, but it's still a quality that we can nurture and develop through a range of different strategies. We want to cultivate the courage to advocate for our convictions, the capacity to go from ideas to actually making decisions, and the propensity to engage in decisive actions in order to achieve tangible results. When it comes to creativity, that's linked to the adult developmental process. Again, that's the group of thought leaders that founded this initiative in the first place. And so it's interesting when we think about creativity. I am specializing in creativity studies, and there are many ways to think about creativity. In the case of this framework, they're differentiating between pre-conventional creativity, conventional, and post-conventional. And when they're talking about creativity, they're talking about patterns for meaning making. So when it's conventional, that means we are taking the prevailing norms and we're practicing them as given. We're not inquiring into alternative possibilities. Whereas post-conventional meaning making, leveraging our creativity in that space, that's where we involve independent envisioning of what becomes desirable and how it could be realized. Okay. We have optimism on this list as well. It could be viewed as a personality trait, but within this framework, the emphasis is on the capacity to inspire hope in others and oneself, that it is possible to achieve meaningful results by focusing on what is doable. I'm going to say that again because I find this incredibly powerful. Optimism in this framework is the capacity to inspire hope in others and oneself, that it is possible to achieve meaningful results by focusing on what is doable. There's such a tremendous opportunity within our research to impute that optimism for others. We've heard the nervousness and questions around what is truly possible, even within the previous sessions and in the chats there. So hold that one and just stay open to it. Lastly, perseverance. The ability to sustain our engagement and remain determined and patient, even when one's efforts take a long time to bear fruit. Perseverance may also be understood as a personality trait or virtue, nod to Tom Cullen right there. Although it's likely that the capacity for sustaining engagement can be strengthened by conscious focusing on the possibilities to achieve long-term positive outcomes. And once again, everything ties together. All of these traits, all of these 5 categories, all these qualities become interrelated. One does not exist without the others. None are empty. I'd like to share a video from the IDG with you, which kind of provides not just a high-level message about this, but it gives a sense of the energy that's happening behind it at a global scale.
The inner development goals show what inner shifts or human growth needs to happen in order for us to increase our chances of reaching the Sustainable Development Goals collectively.
The inner development goals covers 23 skills that are divided into 5 categories. Skills such as inner compass, openness and learning mindset, self-awareness, presence, sense-making, connectedness, humility, co-creation skills, trust, and perseverance.
what I see as the basic human challenge. When we talk about mind shift, when we talk about growth that matters, I think the basic human challenge is this. It is difficult to learn if you already know.
We see a lot of leadership failure, leaders being out of touch with reality. So in other words, it's a lack of listening. So listening, I believe, is not just an important one, it's the most important and most underrated leadership skill today.
Obviously, being flexible, being able to be agile, being able to listen, and be able to be very inclusive in terms of how you lead people. I think those are some of the things that I've learned over the time.
We are built to grow. It is our destiny to grow. A caterpillar is not supposed to die as a caterpillar. Its destiny is to grow wings and fly.
We need to sort of focus more inwards, and what is my responsibility in that? What can I contribute to a development that is more sustainable? But in order to be able to reach those sustainability goals, we need to also be able to take the right decisions to get there.
And I think where we are today, perhaps, is we've hit a limit to purely technocratic external solutions to solve global problems. Mental health and well-being is supported by our inner capacities for spirituality and faith, or education is fundamentally oriented towards meaning and purpose in a changing world, rather than mere content delivery for students.
Being human has many dimensions, and that the dimension that we have been very good at exploring during the last couple of 100 years has been the external world, but that we have come to a point where the outside perspective has to be complemented by an inside perspective.
Teaching a course like Global Challenges at Stockholm School of Economics, I realize more and more that we cannot reach the sustainability goals if we do not work with our inner development. This does not apply only to universities. This applies to all sectors, all ages.
What we really need is a deliberately developmental society. And depending on how severe you think the situation is, maybe we need a deliberately developmental world. And right now we're not even talking about at scale the inner dimensions and how we need to change. Because at the core, we are the problem. The way that we're acting in the world and the way that we are solving problems is the problem.
I used to think the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address those problems. But I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation.
Any sustainable development goal, that's essentially our generation's big, ambitious vision for the world. In our experience, when we work with individuals, both within and outside Oxford, people are more likely to take action when these inspiring visions are brought down to their level.
We bring now the inner development goals with us as a great source of inspiration when we strengthen and revise our competence development roadmaps and make sure that the inner development goals are integrated into this.
And as Einstein said, we are never going to be able to solve our problems with the same order of consciousness that created these problems. So as a species, we need more and more of us to grow and develop so that we have actually a bigger purchase on, a bigger perspective on, a bigger ability to solve the biggest, most dangerous kinds of challenges that we face.
To make the world work better requires highly specialized skills. Very useful, but quite high-level skills. And so what we want to say to people is, yes, it's great that you want to help make the world work better, but you have to get into training.
We are not alone. If we think about our vision for the MSR, was shown, introduced so beautifully at the start of this colloquium, Now, our vision is human flourishing and global consciousness that illuminate and are illuminated by spiritual and religious dimensions of life in management, research, teaching, and practice. And we're on a mission to better the world through a transdisciplinary network of management academics and practitioners exploring the role of the significant and the sacred. We are not alone in this effort. Jody Fry, in his session, introduced us to Open, introduced us to, I'm not going to say it right, because I want to say Pachamama, but it's Pachamama Alliance. The IDG is one more group that we can collaborate with directly, that we can support through the intention and nature of our research. And so I would like to close this part of the session with a question for you and an invitation to get reflexive on our own work and our own possible contributions. What can we, as individuals, as researchers, as the MSR, as this larger community, what can we do to become more effective in our work towards greater human flourishing and well-being? Is it enough to do the research and put it out there? Or is there something deeper that we are being called to do to make a meaningful, significant impact on a world that so desperately needs it? Thank you. Oh, look at all these beautiful faces.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm looking for smiles versus confused looks. I see some of each, so I think we're good. All right. It's always risky attempting that, but I hope that was fruitful. So really, we're going to take about 10 minutes right now and mine for the gold in the conversations that you just had. So if there is a group or a person that is just crawling out of their skin, ready to share an exciting comment, conversation, insight, or transformation, please just unmute and speak up. What were the conversations like? Who wants to go first?
Maybe I could volunteer. Khadija from our group. She was
perfect. Volunteers, voluntold, I think.
That's right. Thank you, Anil. I think we had a very reflexive session, and we started, Anil and I, then Bill and Tom joined us, and also Guillermo. I hope I'm pronouncing the names right. So we started first by talking about the IDGs as a framework, and to be honest, I am in an institution where we don't have a program in the business school that's fully focused on SDGs and on the IDGs. So I see the benefit of me getting engaged in this, and I see the benefit of including the IDGs in all our courses in different ways. But also at the same time, I raised the issue of how we can have coaching programs that actually train the trainers first. And we as educators who want to help students integrate this framework, we need to reach certain level of maturity in terms of how we are delivering this and how we are raising awareness about them. So that's where I was really wondering about the coaching programs that will develop such a movement. So in my head, I was thinking about a movement that could have a greater social impact. And The other issue that Anil raised was about, first of all, he was very much taken by the morning session about the public story versus the different personal stories, and how we can reach some integration. Like we are living in a world that's polyphonic, but how can we integrate all these stories and have the inner peace we are looking for? And also Anil raised the issue of how we can integrate the different groups of skills in a way that we can see them in a continuum, because we might be pursuing different skills at the same time, although they have been presented in a way that we can understand them as groups of skills belonging to different categories. Then Tom brought the idea of the shadow while he was talking about the IDGs, and also I think our colleague we talked also about compassion, and what if we have excessive compassion, what can happen in this case, and wouldn't we be hurting ourselves? And I think I was happy to hear that some of my colleagues have programs in their business schools that deal with SDGs, and I think Tom was trying to also think about how we can integrate how they can integrate the IDGs in their school. That's all what I could retain. I'm sorry, so you can jump in if I forgot some other issues that we talked about.
Yeah, that's all. That was a very thorough report out. Thank you so much. And yeah, the idea of training of management and teaching, I love those sparks. And I'm also hearing in what you shared, the realization that, we don't have to all be good at all these things, when we can partner and come together as a group. Maybe there's somebody who's got persistence in the bag, they've been doing it their whole life, and somebody else who's got, way other things going on. And that's where the magic of a framework like this, no model is perfect. This is not our model. Frankly, Janelle and Stacy and I just came across this a week ago. And it just made sense because it aligned with what we were thinking already. So we thought we'd share it. But who else? James, you have your hand up. Can you do as thorough a report out on your group as Khadija did?
I really like that 5-step continuum, category continuum, and I think it's got face validity. It makes a lot of sense to me, and I enjoy the breakout sessions and the sessions. What keeps coming up for me very strongly is we're creating a lot of anxiety when we face up to the reality we have. And people need something to do, something they can do now and see results. And what came up for me is I've been working with a group called globalmovement.net, which has drawn its focus onto transforming the core course in business schools and finance and marketing and economics to stop doing the work of the devil and supporting business as usual. And I see an angle I hadn't thought of before. We know the SDGs are being embedded on top of business as usual all over the place. We know the business case for sustainability, make more money by doing less harm, is getting widely spread, but it's not going to get us where we need to go. So I realize I'm now looking for someone who's embedded a transformation of a core course in the SDGs, not adding them on, but embedding it as the foundation of the course. We've also been looking at folks that are building their courses on things like the inspired paradigm for Jesuit business education and grappling with other paradigms. From our side, I realize now what I'm looking for is people who can write articles on what they've done to transform a core course grounded in the SDGs, not added on to business as usual, but grounded. The thing I'm excited about is that we need stuff to do. And anybody, a student, a faculty member, an alumnus can look at a core course, and start working on a core course. So this has been a very helpful session to me at a time that I can really appreciate the help. So thank you so much.
Thank you, James. Let's take one or three more comments, and there they are, Jerry and then Tom.
Well, Portia made a very interesting comment when we started our discussion, which was that she noticed, well, there was only one person of color in the whole video. And I think it was when it was mentioning, I think it was humility, which so this raises a couple questions. Yes, there were women in the video, but all the other people were seen to be European. And so it raises a question, what would it, maybe bringing in people from other cultures, would that change things any? Especially like if you think about Africa, like ahimsa and some other qualities. The other thing I noticed is that all of these, you could have done this 20 years ago and talked about emotional intelligence. A lot of the things that were mentioned have been around for a long time. I agree with what Jim says too, that, they usually get just lumped on top of, you have your business course and you throw this in on top, which really raises a question, what would it be like if it went from the other way around? Also, I'm very excited about the ideas of the podcast now. And
yeah,
so
thank you.
if anyone has any ideas, you got to let me know.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. Really great observations and points. And let me say, the little time I've spent with this framework, I'm very clear. The likes of the people that put this together have borrowed from stuff, like you said, that's 20, 30 years old. There's Ken Wilber in here. There's Otto's work, obviously, and he's there himself, and other synthesis and blends of work. And I think that means and speaks to me to that these people came together to not put together something new and groundbreaking from a content point of view, as much as just put it in a framework that's easy to understand and easy to teach and easy to grasp. And so that's really probably the brilliance here. To your diversity comment, I hear you loud and clear. I'm looking at their not Facebook, but their face tiles on their About steering board project team. And yeah, there's men and women, but everybody's white, and I don't see a lot that aren't Caucasian. So goodness gracious. Yep.
I will lean in on this one. And if you read the full report
yes.
that the IDG has released, which a lot of what I talked about came from, because again, we're new and I'm trying to learn this for myself. They explicitly call out the bias inherent in the process. It's less oriented.
I was just going to get to that. Yeah, okay. There is a level of self-awareness, and the scope of their hubs is promising from that point of view. So not to judge it right off the bat, kudos to them for being aware and still taking action no matter who they are. So that's good. Tom, and thank you, Janelle.
Just one comment. I think I like the fact that they've created a framework. There are problems with it. It's Eurocentric. It hasn't been, checked with the rest of the world. But our education is so focused on the external world, and this is a recognition by the UN that we need to focus education on our internal experience. I think that is an important recognition and shift. I think this will help us, because that's what MSR is all about, us making our application for division status. The fact that there's an institution out there compiling this material and saying, this is what we need to do to improve our lot in the world. I think this is an important thing. There are problems with it, but the fact that it's put together in a cohesive, coherent way, drawing on ideas from all over the place to create this cohesive thing, I think that's really important. And I think we can use it for our application.
That's a great place to wrap this discussion. We could certainly keep going, but I want to try and keep things on time. And Stacy has some gems to finish up with. One comment I want to make, this is not a UN initiative. It looks like it. I confused it with one myself. It's very heavily connected with the UN SDG. They use the same colors. There's a lot of links back and forth, but this is its own nonprofit organization separate from the UN.
Oh.
Just to make that clear. Not that that matters very much, but it is just a point. So, Stacy, bring us home.
Well, I'd like to close this thought-provoking session with a call to action. I was talking to Julia Storberg Walker just last week, and we were talking about the things that we're most passionate about. And she said, oh, that sounds like that is your Extinction Rebellion. Who's familiar with Extinction Rebellion? So Extinction Rebellion is a group of activists in large cities primarily who are really trying to bring attention, awareness, and action to our climate crisis. And they are using nonviolent means to bring awareness to what they're doing. And a lot of times they are getting arrested. So this is my challenge to you, my call to action. What is it that you are so passionate about that you would be willing to get arrested for in order to wake people up? So I invite you to just consider that for a moment. And I just invite you to put something in the chat around that. What is an action you would take that you feel so passionate about that you would be willing to get arrested in order to bring awareness to what you're fighting for? Go ahead and put that in the chat whenever you're ready. Beautiful. Mental health awareness, helping people wake up more. Women's and LGBTQ human rights. Quiet activists, interesting. John, thank you. I don't want to be arrested. That's how I fled China. Beautiful. LGBTQ and human rights, lovely. Beautiful. Actual diversity on boards and organizations instead of eternal lip service. Yes. Human dignity. So I hope you have been inspired by what's possible, by how your research and practice and your own spiritual journey fits with these beautiful things that are happening in the world. Janelle says, climate change, I see equity. And I hope that this has been fertilizer for your garden and that your garden just continues to grow from the seeds that have already been planted. So thank you very much, Janelle. Beautiful presentation. Paul, for your facilitation. And thanks to you all for being here. And Paul, I'll hand it back over to you so you can talk about what's next.
Thank you so much. The pace continues to move at a fast clip here. So we've got just a 15-minute break before a panel discussion.